It is interesting that in spite of the killings committed by those of the Islamic faith, Islam continues to attract adherents and continues to be protected by Western governments. In this video, we will hear a lecture on the Islamic book, the Quran, by Bill Warner. Bill is one of the foremost scholars of political Islam and the history and doctrine of the so-called religion of peace. The website for this and Bill's other lectures is given on the screen here. Now here is Bill Warner's lecture on the Quran.
The Quran has been put in a form that is easy to comprehend. Now anyone can understand it.
Our next lesson is on the Quran. The Quran must surely be the world's most famous book that has not been read. How many people do you know who can say, I have read the Quran and understood it? The word Quran is an Arabic one, and it means recitation. The Quran is perfect, complete, universal, and final. It contains not the slightest error, since it had come directly from Allah, the only God of the universe, and it is in His exact words. The Quran was created before the universe was created, and it sits on an emerald table at the right hand of Allah. The Quran we have today was created or brought together by the third Caliph, Uthman. It is said that Muslims were beginning to say that there were many versions of the Quran out, and so therefore there would soon be error. So Uthman, as absolute ruler, called in all of the Qurans and turned them over to a secretary. It was the secretary's job to compile the new Quran. Now then, after it was put together, Uthman did something that was very telling. He burned all the original source material. Now ask yourself a question. What reason can you think of that he burned the original source material if the reason that they had put together a new Quran was that there was variation? But as a result of the burning of all the source Qurans, Muslims like to boast today that their Quran has no variations, that it was delivered in this exact form from Allah, and the lack of variations shows its perfection. And then they make remarks about the variations in historical text contained in the Jewish Bible and the New Testament. Since Islam means submission, this argument that the Quran is perfect and the New Testament and Old Testament contain variations is another assertion that demands submission from the Christian and the Jew. The Quran contains 114 surahs, which we would call chapters. If you pick up a Quran and thumb through it, you can notice very quickly that the long chapters are in the beginning and the short chapters are all at the end. And that is the way that the Quran is arranged, and this leads to one of the major difficulties in understanding it. Imagine if you took a mystery novel and you cut off the spine, and then you rearrange the chapters. You put the longest chapter up front and the shortest chapter at the back. Then you took and rebound this book and handed it to a friend and told him, "Oh, this is a great mystery novel. Read this." Your friend would try to read it and go, "I can't understand this. When I turn the page, I seem to go back in time or sometimes forward in time. I don't understand. There's no story to this. There's no plot." And that is the way the Quran is arranged. Now, if you take the Quran and put it in the right time order, then it appears to be a much more logical book. But when you go to the bookstore, you'll get the classical format, longest chapters up front, and it will seem very confusing. Another thing about the Quran that's very confusing is that the stories in many cases are not complete at all. Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But the stories in the Quran many times are like you walked in halfway through the story. You don't know what the beginning is. This is odd, since the Quran has obviously derived many of its stories from the Old Testament, and the Old Testament stories are wonderfully told. But not so with the Quran. There is not one really complete story in all of the Quran. There's always something missing. Another thing that's interesting about the Quran is how repetitious it is. This becomes very tiring when you're trying to read it. As an example, the story of Moses and the Pharaoh is repeated in some fashion 39 times. Now the repetition is so intense in the Quran that if you remove all of the repetition, the Quran is cut in half. And that does not leave a very big book, since the Quran is about the same size as the New Testament. There's another thing that's a little odd about the stories. They fall into two classifications. There are some retelling of old Arabic stories, and then there are the retelling of the Jewish stories. Adam, Noah, Moses, all of these characters appear in the Quran. But if you're familiar with the stories in the Jewish Bible, the Torah, they're not the same story. They merely have the same characters. For instance, it is the purpose of Moses not to free the Jews as slaves, instead to get the Pharaoh to admit that Moses is the prophet of Allah. The same is true with the story of Noah. The whole story of Noah centers around making the people of the earth admit that Noah is the prophet of Allah. And because they would not admit that Noah was the prophet of Allah and do everything that he said, Allah destroyed the earth. So the stories are similar to the stories in the Old Testament, but they've all been changed so that they proclaim one theme. Those who do not recognize the prophets of Allah will be destroyed. And since Muhammad claimed to be the prophet of Allah, it is seen that all of these stories are self-serving. The other thing that becomes apparent when you read the Quran is how much of it is devoted to the kafir, the unbeliever. As a matter of fact, 61% of the Quran is devoted to the kafir. That only leaves less than 40% to be devoted to the Muslims. The Quran is not a very big book at all when you get down to the fine point of what does it mean to be a Muslim. And hereupon you learn something else about the Quran. There is not enough in it to practice the religion of Islam. So for a work which claims to be complete, it is remarkably incomplete. Of the 5 pillars of Islam, not one of them is given indications how to perform it in the Quran. The other thing that strikes people who press on through and read the Quran is this. The Quran is very contradictory. It says things that are completely opposite. So much so that in the days of Muhammad, some of the Kafirs pointed this out to Muhammad. Well, you said this earlier, now you're saying this. They're opposite. Which is it? And the Quran says, Allah can replace a verse with one which is better. But let's dwell on this a moment. Replace it with one which is better means that the better one comes later. You need a sense of the time order of the Quran in order to determine which of the 2 contradictory verses is true, and this time order is known. Although the Quran you buy in the bookstore has it arranged from longest chapter to shortest chapter, since the beginning, Muslims have known which the right order is in terms of time. This cancellation of one verse by another is called abrogation, but it doesn't really work like that, because think about it for a moment. If the earlier verse was by Allah, then that verse is true, because Allah, by definition, cannot tell a lie. So this leaves the Quran a very peculiar book. It is contradictory, but both sides of the contradiction are true. And this turns out to be an insight into the mind of Islam and the mind of Muslims, because it means that Muslims can hold in their mind two contradictory ideas and accept both of them as being true. This is an insight into how Muslims after September 11th were able to say Islam is a peaceful religion. It's a contradiction. A peaceful religion doesn't send out jihadists to kill 3,000 people. Those are a contradiction. But if you are a Muslim, you have been trained to accept contradictory facts, and so as a result, these contradictions do not bother you at all. They don't cause you any mental problem. The Quran is a dualistic document. This dualism goes very deep into the Quran. If you arrange it in the right time order, the Quran written in Mecca is a radically different Quran than the one written in Medina. They are so different that you could take a class of college students and in 1 hour's time teach them how to pick out a verse, taken at random, and tell you whether it was written in Mecca or Medina. The two Qurans are that different. The earlier Quran is more religious. For instance, a great deal of the early Quran is spent on describing the kafir in hell. And there's a very interesting insight into the Islamic view of the kafir. There are 147 different references to hell. Now, there are more than 147 verses about hell, but taking it as a topic by topic, there are 147 of them. 94% of these say that the reason that the kafir is burning in hell is because he did not believe that Muhammad was the prophet of Allah. The remainder are people in hell for morals charges, that is, theft, greed, hate. What does that tell us about Islamic hell? It's a political prison for those who do not believe that Muhammad is the prophet of Allah. And indeed, the great majority of the Meccan Quran is devoted to that theme, because most of the stories about the Old Testament characters are found in the Quran of Mecca. And remember, those stories have all been reworked to preach only one theme: Muhammad is the prophet of Allah. Indeed, the entire Meccan Quran can be summarized in that one sentence: Muhammad is the prophet of Allah, and if you don't believe it, you are going to suffer. Now, the Quran written in Medina carries out the same hatred of the kafir, but it manifests it in a totally different way. There's not much mention of hell in Medina, because there's a new concept of suffering for the kafir that's introduced. In Mecca, the kafir suffers after he dies. In Medina, he suffers in this life. He can be tortured, beheaded, robbed, and worse. The Medinan Quran has the same kafir hatred, but this time with jihad. The kafir suffers and dies in this life. So the Medinan Quran is also very political. The Medinan Quran introduces Muhammad's greatest innovation, that of jihad. It also introduces dhimitude, the political subservience of the Christian and the Jew. Now, as sure as someone brings up the violence in the Quran, someone is going to say, oh, well, the Quran is no different than the Old Testament. The Old Testament has a lot of violence in it as well. There's an element of truth in it. Yes, there is violence in the Old Testament, but it's enormously different from the violence in the Quran. The violence in the Old Testament is local and temporary. That is, it is against a neighboring tribe and for a certain period of time. This is not true of the violence in the Quran. The violence in the Quran is universal and eternal. The jihad is to go on until the last kafir leaves the face of the earth. There's a great deal of difference between temporary and local violence, and a universal, eternal violence. Notice that although jihad is always called holy war, it is really better described as simply political war. Why? Because the only reason in the Quran that people are attacked and killed is they do not agree that Muhammad is the prophet of Allah. That's an intellectual idea, actually. And so therefore, jihad is political war against the kafir. It is not actually a holy war. Another thing when you read the Quran is this: it makes a big deal out of the fact that it is Arabic. As a matter of fact, the Quran, which defines Allah, because before Muhammad, Allah was just the moon god of the Quraysh, his tribe. So Allah is defined in the Quran. He does not ever come forth after Muhammad because Muhammad said he was the final prophet. The Quran defines Allah. Allah did not really exist before the Quran. Then there is the matter of self-identification as an Arabic document. More than once it proclaims that this Quran is brought forth to you in Arabic, and indeed Allah is an Arab. That's very clear. Remember, the original language before there was a creation even was Arabic, because the Quran was created before the universe. The Quran goes further into its Arabic nature. It says that the Meccan Arabs are to rule all. There are also occasionally little elements of racism, like the remark, on the day of judgment, the Kafirs will be blue-eyed with terror. What does that mean, blue-eyed with terror? The Arabs had brown eyes, and Muhammad's enemies, the Syrians, were actually Greek, because that part of the world had been Greek culture for 900 years, and many of them had blue eyes. So the phrase, they will be blue-eyed with terror, is a minor racial slur. A more major thing is this: when you bring up something negative about the Quran, a Muslim always quickly responds, "Oh, but did you read it in the Arabic?" Well, no, you read it in English. And then he will say, "Well, you can't really understand the Quran unless you read it in Arabic." Now let's stop and think about this statement for a moment. The Quran claims to be universal. That is, it applies to all people. But since only a small portion of the world reads Arabic, that means these ideas must be understandable in languages other than Arabic, or they would not be universal. So which is it? Can the ideas be understood in English or not? Because if the ideas in the Quran cannot be understood in English, then those ideas are not universal. The other weakness to the "oh, but you don't understand Arabic" is this: the great majority of Muslims today don't speak Arabic, so the Quran has been translated into their language, and they're fully practicing Muslims without the aid of Arabic reading. Now, what many Muslims can do is to recite the Quran in the classical Arabic. But you need to understand that classical Arabic is not the Arabic of today. Languages change over time, and a modern Arab cannot pick up a random Quran verse and read it and understand it. It's like if you studied Chaucer. Chaucer wrote in English, but the English is very difficult for us to understand. It is the same with a native Arab speaker picking up the Quran and reading it. He too is not fully aware of what is said. He too has to have the classical Arabic translated into modern Arabic. Arabic is no barrier to understanding the Quran. It's been translated into all languages. In the end, the Quran is a document about the kafir. 61% of it is about hating the kafir and how the kafir must be subdued. Therefore, the Quran is primarily a political document, not a religious document, because a Muslim cannot be involved in a religious service with a kafir. It's mostly a political document, not a religious document. The other thing is to ask the question, what does the Quran bring to the table that is new? And it brings the following new ideas. Muhammad is the prophet of Allah, and jihad can be practiced against those who do not believe that simple fact. That's the only new thing that the Quran brings. Everything else in the Quran, without exception, is derivative. The old Arabic stories, the old stories that have been reworked from the Old Testament, ideas from the Zoroastrian religion, and ideas from the local Arabic religion at the time of Muhammad. It is interesting that the Quran claims to be the work of a universal God, but the horizon of the Quran goes no further than Muhammad's eyes. Now, in the past, the Quran has been a document that is difficult to read. That is no longer true. The work of scholars has now produced a book called A Simple Quran, and all the verses are in the right order. They've all been grouped, so you eliminate the repetition by there they are in one big chunk. And Muhammad's life has been woven through the Quran. Because you see, although the Quran claims to be a complete document, there are many, many things in the Quran that cannot be understood unless you know the life of Muhammad. For instance, which verse comes earlier, which verse comes later. If you know Muhammad's life, it is easy to tell which one is earlier than later. It is Muhammad's life that gives meaning to the Quran. Here's a small example. When you read the Quran, it says a remark about destruction of the palm trees. If you're reading this verse about the destruction of palm trees in a Quran that comes from the bookstore, you're stunned. Where did this come from? Because it's the only discussion of palm trees, and you weren't discussing palm trees. Where did this come from? In a simple Quran, you know what it means when Muhammad is given permission to burn the palm trees, because it was only a few days earlier that he attacked the Jews, and they had a date palm plantation, and contrary to the rules of war, Muhammad destroyed their date palms, and the Arabs condemned him for violating the rules of war. Hence the declaration in the Quran that it was okay to burn and destroy the palm trees. This is an example of how Muhammad's life gives meaning to the Quran. And indeed, when Muhammad's life is woven into the Quran becomes an epic story. It depicts the rise of power from Muhammad being an orphan and a businessman to the supreme ruler of all of Arabia, with the goal of becoming the supreme ruler of all of the world. So, the Quran is a great epic story. You should read it and understand it.
Brought to you by the Center for the Study of Political Islam.